Hello, and thank you for joining me on my new free knitting tutorial. If you are new here, hi, welcome. My name is Tabitha, and I am the owner of Mountaintop Yarn. I do hand-dyed yarns, patterns, and hand knit, hand crochet, hand Tunisian crochet objects, finished objects that I sell in my store. And in my spare time, I like to write patterns and make YouTube videos for people who love free patterns. So if that's you, then make sure you hit the like, make sure you hit the subscribe to be notified when I release new patterns. I do knit, I do crochet, I do Tunisian crochet. So today we're doing a knit pattern. This is a beautiful little stroller or baby carrier blanket. So this is meant to be something that you just, tuck the baby in, add an extra layer of warmth, and just something nice and elegant to go on top of, any existing blankets to just give that polished look and a little bit extra warmth. So this blanket is going to be a finished size of about 14 wide by 17 tall, which I believe is technically a lovey blanket or a snuggle blanket. But for this instance, I visualize this as just something that is eye-catching. You're walking around, you're strolling your baby, and you've got this beautiful open lacework knit blanket on top, and people are just like, oh my goodness, that is so gorgeous. Where did you get that? And then you can proudly say, I made that. So that is the goal for today. This is a pretty simple pattern. It's a 8-row repeat. So you start, kind of here at the bottom, and then you work up, and there's 8 rows. So even though there's 8 rows, 4 of the rows are actually just purl rows because it's worked front and back. It's not worked in the round. So you have the front, which is going to be the knit, and then the open lace work patterns, and then the back side is just going to be all purls every time. Now you can modify this pattern if you don't want a small size blanket. Let's say you want a lap blanket or you want a larger size blanket. Then this pattern consists of a 10-stitch repeat, and there's 7 repeats here. I think, there's 6 repeats with 5 stitches on each side for the garter. So the garter is about a quarter or half an inch on each side. And the inside, these are about, I believe, let's measure it. Now I haven't blocked this yet, so keep that in mind. So it's about 2 inches for each one of these little triangles. So if you wanted to add, enough stitches, just increment by 10. So if you wanted enough stitches for a lap blanket, increment by 10. And then of course, with the height of the blanket, you can just keep knitting until you get your desired height. Now there's so many ways that you could, alter this to fit exactly what you want. You don't have to make a stroller blanket. You can make a lap blanket. You can make a panel. So you can make this one just a little bit skinnier. So say you just knit 4 repeats. So you just have this right here. You can make this skinnier and then make it long enough to be a lap blanket. And then you can create, other ones. Let's say you wanted to have a different pattern. You can piecework pattern panels together to make a bigger blanket. So you're not just committing to an entirely massive blanket in just one shot. So there's lots of options for this pattern repeat. You don't have to do the stroller blanket. The stroller blanket and the carrier blanket is just what I'm doing to show you the pattern. So I really hope you like this. If you do end up making this pattern and you want to show it off, go ahead and tag the photo. Tag me in that photo on Instagram. My handle is @Mountaintop Yarn Co, and I'll go ahead and flash it up here on the screen. I'd love to see your finished work. I'd love to see what you make. All right, so let's go ahead and get into a little bit of the details here. So for this exact piece right here, the stroller blanket, I've used around 85 grams of yarn. Now this is a light DK, and I kind of like it because of the stitch definition. It gives a beautiful, beautiful stitch definition if you're using a light DK, and it isn't as arduous as a fingering. So a fingering would take a little bit longer because it is smaller, but it's not as hefty as a worsted. So it still gives you that delicate look, but it gives you also the ability to work up a piece a little bit quicker than fingering. So this is perfect for busting your stash if you have, you know, a bunch of DK, which is exactly what I did. I had a bunch of DK, so I was like, let me go ahead and bust my stash with this. Grab this. I have no idea what this yarn is. This has been sitting in my stash for over a year now, and I have long since forgotten what it is. But perfect stash buster. So go ahead and grab your yarn, and we'll get into the rest of the materials you'll need next. All right, to begin, we're going to need a sport weight or a light DK weight yarn. Here I'm using some scraps from my yarn stash in a beautiful little blue color. So let's go ahead and get that ready. There we go. There's the end. We're also going to need 9 stitch markers. We might use less, but just having 9 is a good amount. And this is going to be dependent on how big you make the blanket. So if you're following the tutorial as is, then you're going to need 7. But if you make it bigger, if you adjust the size, you're going to add a marker for every time you adjust the size. So I'm just making it per the pattern, so I'm going to need 7 actually. So we're going to put 7 markers there. I have a lovely tapestry needle. We have some stitch holders here, which is going to help us keep our work on the needles when we stop and work on something else or have to do anything other than knitting. I also have some nice little scissors here. And we also need Frank to help us remember where the middle of the frame is. So everybody say hi to Frank. We're also going to need a set of straight. You can use circular if you want. It's entirely up to you, but I'm using straight. 4.5 millimeter, which is a US size 7 knitting needles. All right, let's begin. To start, we're going to pull out a length of yarn. So what I do to figure out how much to actually pull out from my cast on, I take this yarn, hold it to the needle, and then I wrap it around, say 10 times. So then I pinch right where it wraps off, and I pinch right where I've wrapped it on, and I undo it here. And so I know that is about 10. So I'll put some extra. So I'll hold my finger there. Let's use Frank's butt as the indicator. So I'll hold my finger there, and then I'll just, you know, here's some extra. Let's do lots of extra so we have lots to weave in. So we've got 10, 20, 30, 40, 50, 60, and 70. So that should give us 70, enough yarn for 70 cast-ons. So I'm going to make my slip knot. Let me go slower a little bit. So wrap it around your finger, wrap it over itself so it makes an X. Lift the back part up, and then it'll kind of just fall right there. Stick your needle right through there. Grab both ends, pull, and then pull the yarn that's not connected to the ball. So I want to go ahead and say, excuse my sniffling. I actually came down with COVID over Christmas and I still have a little bit of lingering congestion. So I do apologize if I don't edit out some of the sniffs. I know that can be really annoying. Okay, so with that out of the way. So we have 1 on our needle. So let's go ahead and put on 70. So I'm going to do my slingshot. And then I'm going to start casting on. So I have 1, 2. So I've got 10 cast on here. If you'd like, take one of your stitch markers and just put them out, say 10. that helps me because I consistently lose count of where I'm at in my cast on. If you need help figuring out how to cast on, I have some videos on my channel and I'll link to some of them up here so you can learn how to do the cast on that I just did. So I'm going to continue casting on until I get 70 stitches and then I'll meet you back. All right, we're back and I've got 70 stitches on my needle here. Fantastic, looks beautiful. I love this blue color. So I'm going to move my tail out of the way. Going to grab my working yarn and from here we're going to work 5 rows of garter stitch. 5 rows of garters, really easy. All it is just knit across, but with one caveat on this pattern. We're going to slip the first stitch as if to purl. So we're going to bring the yarn in front. We have our yarn sitting in front here. I'm going to stick my needle in as if to purl, and then I'm going to slip that stitch off, and then I'm going to move the yarn to the back, the working yarn, and I'm going to start knitting across. So by slipping that first stitch, we're going to have a beautiful finished edge, and it's really going to add to the visual appeal of the blanket. So we're going to continue knitting across, and for every row that we do, we're going to slip that first stitch, always as if to purl with the yarn in front. So go ahead and knit all the way across and do that for 5 rows. All right, now you should have something that looks like this. So we have our 5 rows of garter stitch. It's giving us a nice little bumped edge here, and this is going to help prevent the work from curling up as we're knitting. So now we're going to get into the pattern part of the repeat pattern part of this project. So we always have 5 stitches at the beginning and 5 stitches at the end that are for the garter, because we want to continue the garter up the edge, right, up both edges. So this first stitch, obviously we're going to purl with the yarn in front, or slip as if to purl with the yarn in front, and then we're going to knit 1, 2, 3, 4 stitches. So let's go ahead and do that right now. Let's get situated. So we're going to slip that first stitch as if to purl with the yarn in front, and then we're going to knit 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we have 5 stitches on our right needle because we slipped that first one, and I'm going to go ahead and place a marker. So get your marker out, place your marker. So now our first stitch is going to be a knit. So we're going to knit that first stitch, and then we're going to bring our yarn forward. So we're going to bring it forward, and then we're going to wrap it over the top of the needle, and then we're going to come back, holding that, hold it with your finger, bring the yarn back to the back of the work, and then we're going to knit 3. So 1, 2, 3. So now we're going to slip the next stitch as if to knit. So just pop it right off there. And then we're going to knit these 2 together. two together. And then we're going to take that slip stitch that we did and we're going to pull it over that knit two together. Now we're going to knit three. 1, 2, 3. We're going to bring our yarn to the front again, wrap it around to the back of the needle, hold it there, grab yourself another stitch marker and place your stitch marker there. Then we're going to repeat that. So we're going to knit 1, we're going to yarn forward, put the needle or put the yarn back to the back of the work, knit 3. 1, 2, 3. We're going to slip this next stitch as if to knit, so we're going to insert the needle as if we're going to knit it, and then we're going to slip it right off. Knit 2 together, pass that slip stitch over, so we're going to grab that slip stitch and pull it over, and then we're going to knit 3. 1, 2, 3, and then we're going to yarn forward, bring the yarn over the back of the needle, hold that yarn there, grab yourself a stitch marker, and slide your stitch marker on. So go ahead and do that to the last 5 stitches and then stop there. All right, now we're at the last 5 stitches. So we're just going to knit these across. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Perfect. So the next row, which is row 2, is going to be a purl row, but we're going to have to keep in mind that we're doing the garter edge. So those first stitches are going to be knit. So like with all rows, we're going to slip as if to purl with the yarn in front, and then we're going to knit those 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. So now we're going to slip our marker. We're going to move our yarn to the front, and then we're going to purl all the way to the last 5 stitches. So when we get to the last marker, then we're going to switch to knitting those last 5 stitches. So go ahead and purl all the way to the last marker. All right, so we've come to the last marker, so now we're just going to knit these last 5 stitches to complete our garter stitch edge. Fantastic. All right, so now we're back on the front side of the work. We're going to do our row 3. So go ahead and do your garter ridge or garter stitch edge and get to that first marker. Just go ahead and slip that marker over to the right needle. So now we're going to knit 2, 2, then we're going to yarn forward, bring the yarn to the back of the work again, and then we're going to knit 2 more, knit 2, and then we're going to slip the next stitch as if to knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over, and then knit 2. Then we're going to yarn forward and knit 1. I apologize, I had a visitor come. Now we're back on track. So you just finished one pattern repeat. So what we're going to do now is slip this marker. I'm going to show it to you again. So we're going to knit 2, yarn forward, and then bring the yarn to the back, and then knit 2. Slip 1 as if to knit, knit 2 together. Almost lost that one. Knit 2 together, pass the slip stitch over, knit 2, yarn forward, knit 1. And then just keep doing that until you get to the last marker. forgot to slip that stitch. All right, so if you're like me and you forget to slip stitch sometimes, just go back, just slide those stitches back over until you get to the offending stitch. You don't have to undo them, just slide them over. I get ahead of myself sometimes and I don't pay attention. I start thinking about other things. All right, so I'm just going to work my way back. So I believe it's here. So let me take a look at what I've done here. So I have knit 2, yarn over, knit 2, slip. I didn't even knit those two together, I don't think. What was I doing? Where was my head? Oh yeah, I did. I did knit them together. I just didn't pass it over. Okay, so I have my 2 stitches knit together and I didn't pass that stitch over. So I'm just going to go ahead and pass it over. And then I'm just going to slide these back until I get to that last marker. I do that every once in a while because I start thinking about random things. So if you do that, don't fuss, don't worry, it's easy to fix. Okay, so now we're back to where we should be. We've got all of our stitches done up the way they need to be, and we're at our last marker. So I'm just going to go ahead and slide that marker over, and then I'm going to knit the last 5 stitches. Okay, fantastic. So you should have something that kind of looks like this now. And you'll notice that it's getting a little wavy, and that's okay. That's part of the stitch pattern. It'll give it a nice little wavy edge on the top and bottom when you finish it. So can't really see much now, but it is starting to form. You can see the little holes, and you can see the pattern going up like that. So on the next round, this is going to be round 4. We're going to do our garter edge. So let's move that stitch over and then knit the 4. And then we're going to slide our marker and we're going to purl all the way to the last marker. And then once we get to that last marker, we're going to slide that marker over and then we're going to knit 5. So I'll see you at the end of that row. All right, so now we're in row 5, or round 5. So you can see now we've got a little bit of definition coming into the fabric. So we've got some upside down triangles coming here. And then we got our little triangles forming here with the decrease in the center. So we're going to do our garter edge, as always. Slip on as if to purl with the yarn in front. And then we're going to knit 4. Now we're going to slip that marker, and now we're going to knit 3. And then we're going to yarn over, and we're going to knit 1. And then we're going to slide or slip 1 as if to knit 2 together. Pass the slip stitch over, knit 1, yarn over, knit 2. So I'd like to show you something here for a second. So if you notice, what we're doing is we're moving up the fabric in this repeat, is that we're slowly and gradually moving this yarn over 1 to the left on this side and 1 to the right on this side. So we have a knit 1, yarn over, knit 2, yarn over, knit 3, yarn over, knit 3 is where we're at now. So we have 5 stitches, I believe, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, between here and the decrease. So if you're looking for a way to memorize the pattern, that would probably be the first step. That's when I started memorizing. I'm like, okay, this yarn, this open yarn space, the yarn forward is just moving 1 until we get to where, you know, we're at that slip stitch. So let's continue on here and you'll see it start to develop. So we're going to knit 3, yarn over, knit 1, or yarn forward, not yarn over. And then there you go. So now we have our decrease again. We're going to knit 1, yarn forward, knit 2. And do that one more time since that was a little chaotic that last time. So we're going to knit 3, yarn forward, knit 1, slip 1 as if to knit, knit 2 together, pass slip stitch over, knit 1, yarn forward, knit 2. And that's the repeat for this round. You'll just continue that to the last marker here, and then you'll just knit these 5 stitches. And I'll see you at the end. Okay. Now we're on row 6. So this is going to be an all purl row with the exception of the garter edge. So same as always, slip as if to purl with the yarn in front, knit 4, slide that marker over, and then just purl all the way to the last marker. I'll meet you there at the end. All right, we've reached the end here. I've slid the marker over. Now I'm going to go ahead and knit my 5 stitches, and then we're going to move on to round 7, or row 7. I never know that I want to call it round or row. I think both are fine. Okay, row 7. So we're going to do our normal business, slip 1 purlwise with yarn in front and knit 4. All right, so now we're going to, let's see, I think it's knit 4. So 1, 2, 3, 4, and then we yarn over, and then we slip as if to knit, knit 2 together, pass the slip stitch over, yarn over, knit 3. So let's do that again. Yeah. So let's slide our marker. We're going to knit 4, yarn over. Now it's hold on to this, slide your stitch over, like slip it as if to knit, and you got to hold on to this, otherwise it's going to come loose, right? So keep your finger there, knit 2 together, and then once you've got that yarn secured in there, you can let it go because it won't go anywhere. Pass a slip stitch over, yarn forward, knit 3. Let's do that one more time. Knit 4, yarn forward, slip as if to knit, knit 2 together. As soon as you have that yarn hooked around that needle, you can let this go because it's going to hold that tension on there. And then knit those 2 together, pass slip stitch over, yarn forward, knit 3. So that's probably the trickiest part here, because let me show you. Let's knit 4. So if I'm knitting this and I yarn forward and I don't, let's say I hold it for a second, I slip this and then I let it go, right? And I'm trying to get my stitches in here, then you have a good chance that that thing's going to get in a weird spot. It's going to go over this, like this or something, right? Like you don't want it to sit like that. So you want to make sure that that yarn stays behind the needle and behind the stitch that you slipped. So I'm going to hold my finger there, knit 2 together, and then let go. Pass the slip stitch over, yarn forward, knit 3. So just be mindful when you're working this round to make sure that yarn forward doesn't go wonky on you. Oh, almost knit that. All right, so we got one more repeat here. All right, so we just finished all of our repeats. I'm going to slip this marker, and I'm going to knit 5. Perfect. All right, so row 8. Row 8 is going to be another purl row. So do your garter business here. Slip a zip to purl with yarn in front, knit 4. And then once you get through that, go ahead and purl all the way to the last marker, slip that marker and knit 5. And I'll meet you there. All right, I've gone ahead and jumped ahead a little bit, and by a little bit, I mean that I went ahead and completed the the repeat. So I'm going to give you a little bit of a looky-see here so you can see what I'm talking about. So for each pattern repeat, we have a point. So we have this point here, this point here, this point here. So what you're going to want to do now, you're at this point here. So you're going to repeat this a total of, you're going to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. So you're going to repeat rows 1 through 8 for a total of 12 times. And you should get some fabric that looks like this. So go ahead and feel free to pause me here and continue on with the work. And then once you're done, we'll move on to finishing this beautiful little blanket off. All right, so I'm assuming that you've got your 12 repeats. Now, if you've cast on more stitches and you're making a bigger blanket, you're going to want to repeat until it measures however tall you want the blanket, so whatever height you want the blanket. So seeing how I'm just doing the stroller blanket, then I'm going for a 14 by 17. And so this is going to actually measure out. Let's go ahead and measure this real quick just to see what we've got, what we're working with. This is going to be a little bit difficult. Let me turn it this way. I've got something up there. It's going to cause it to be a little bit hard to measure. So let's go ahead and stretch this out. So currently as it sits, it's about 15.5. Now, this is going to be about a 1/2 inch. The edge, you can't even see where I'm pointing. So this edge is going to be about a 1/2 inch, which is going to give us 16 inches. And then when we block it, it's going to give us another inch. So typically if I'm doing any sort of open stitch work, which is kind of like what this says, I want to block it because you get that beautiful definition once you block it. So if I stretch and pull just a little bit here, you can see the difference between when I just let it go. So I'm going to block mine so it gives definition to those stitches. And that'll give me the extra inch I need on the top. All right, enough talking. Let's finish this off. So for our next row, we're going to do our garter business here at the front. So we're going to slip one with yarn in front as if to purl, and then we're going to knit 4. 2, 3, 4. Now the fun part about this row is that from here on out, we're just going to be knitting across. And now we actually get to remove the markers. So when you come to a marker, just go ahead and pull it off. I'm going to move my little tray over here. Just pull it off and drop it in that tray. And just knit all the way across. And you're going to do that for 5 rows. So go ahead and drop that stitch marker off into the little tray there. And keep trucking along. Once you complete the 5 rows, then I will meet you back here so we can cast off. All right, see you in a minute. All right, I'm coming up on the last bit here. Oop, on my cast off. So I'm going to do these last few stitches. Now here's my last one. So when I pull this over, I'm going to have one more stitch left. So what I want to do is just pull that yarn up a good bit. And I'm going to get my scissors and just cut that end. And then I'm going to take my finger and just pull it all the way through. So now I have my finished edge. So I have a beautiful finished edge here. Beautiful finished edge on the bottom. And now we have our finished blanket. So pretty. Such a beautiful stitch pattern. Especially so once it's blocked out a little bit, it's going to give it a little bit more definition. I'm very happy with this overall. So the next thing I want to do is I want to weave in my ends. And if you're new to weaving in ends, if this is your first time, I'm going to give you a little bit of an example here. If not, then I think you're good. You're good to weave in however you see fit. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to thread my yarn onto a tapestry needle. I have mine here. Mine has a little bit of a curve to it. If you have a straight one, that's fine too. It's just your preference. Now what I'm going to do is on this edge stitch, it has a tendency to get a little wonky. So I'm going to go back in through here. And really this is just eyeball it and see what works best, right? So you see how I've made it not so wonky now. It's not sticking up that way. So I see which way the yarn's going when I cast off, and then I just go the opposite direction to kind of pull it back. I'm offering some balance, right? And I see a lot of people who will go this way when they weave in their ends. I see people go this way when they weave in their ends. It's really about where you're expecting most of the tension for your work to go. So if you think that people are going to be pulling your work this way or they're going to be pulling it that way, it's really up to you, like which direction you go. But this is a blanket, so I think it's going to get stretched either way. So I'm going to go this way because it's a little bit easier to get into these loops than it is to get into these. So what I'm going to do is just thread my yarn up underneath each of those purl bumps in the back. Now you want to make sure that you're staying to the back of your work and that your needle and your yarn aren't going through to the front. So I'm going to do one that's through to the front. So if I go like this, you can see that you can see my needle there. So that's going to show on the front. That yarn's going to show on the front, and you don't want that. So once I go up under that one little loop there, you can see, you can't see the needle, right? Because I'm just under that purl bump. So make sure that you're not coming to the front of your work whenever you're weaving in your ends. So I'm going to do this for a number of stitches. Give it a nice little secure weave in. My golden rule is usually anywhere from 10 to 12 stitches. I don't know why. I think it's just I like the even numbers. I lost count because I was talking, so it's going to be however many that amount is. But I can't count and talk at the same time, apparently. So once I get to where I'm at the last one, I'm going to be weaving in the last stitch. Then I'm going to start backtracking. But here's the key on this part. When I start backtracking, I want to make sure that I'm splitting that yarn. So I'm going to like bring this up here a little bit and I'm going to show you. So whenever you split the yarn, you make sure that needle goes into the fibers. So you see how I'm splitting that yarn open with that needle? So that way when I do that, see I'm going back in here, I'm grabbing that yarn and I'm splitting it. So you see how the yarn is split open? So I'm going to weave that in through itself. So that way as the blanket ages, it gets a little bit more wear, it gets washed, it gets loved on, it gets used. It's going to actually create kind of like the fibers are going to lock together like this, right? So it's going to be harder for those fibers to come apart. So if you just consider like you're weaving it in and it's going like this, you know, eventually over time it could split open. But if it's weaved in like this, like it's going to be a lot harder to get undone. And this works especially well for natural fibers like wool, alpaca, merino, stuff like that. Acrylic, not so much, because acrylic doesn't bind to itself. So if you're using acrylic, just try to split the yarn just to give yourself that little extra bit of locking power. But acrylic is just, it's a weird fiber to work with because it will come unraveled. So, now that I've gotten that done, I don't want to bring the weave in all the way to the edge, right? Because I don't want, you know, the yarn eventually poking out like that, right? So, you know, as it wears, if it does unweave a little bit, I don't want it poking out like that, because that would just be poopy to me. So I'm gonna stop at about an inch from the edge, and then I'm just gonna trim it. And then give it a little bit of a tug to kind of get that edge to go into the fiber. And there you go. Your edge is now woven in, or your ends are woven in. Well, I have one more end down here to do, but let's just ignore that for now. So at this point, you're done. You can block the blanket. I'm going to block it to give myself a little bit more stitch definition, but you can choose not to block it as well. And this is a lovely little blanket for putting over a stroller or a baby carrier, just to give, you know, that little touch of cuteness or that little touch of elegance on top of, you know, if you have other blankets on there that maybe you're just a little bit more plain, you can put this one as the top blanket and kind of tuck it in on the edges, and it gives a very elegant, you know, cute look when you're going around. I don't know. You know what I mean. If you like this video, go ahead and go down to that little bar below the video and give me a thumbs up. If you want to see more free patterns, I do knit patterns, crochet patterns, Tunisian crochet patterns. It just all depends on what kind of mood I'm in. So today I was in a knitting mood, so I decided to do a knit pattern. Next time it could be crochet, next time it could be Tunisian crochet. You never know with me. So if you want free patterns, go ahead and click that subscribe button, and you'll be notified when I release new ones. All right, thank you. Bye.